We're going to go over worksheet 6.2. I want you to try to do worksheet 6.2 without me first. And then look at this recording to see if you did it correctly. The first problem in section 6.2 worksheet asks you to find a cubic function. So we're going to go to our calculator and we're going to enter our data. So we're going to go to Stat. We're going to go to Edit. I'm going to clear out my data from my previous problems. We know that in L1, I'm going to put my X values. And then I'm going to enter my Y values in -2. Okay, I'm going to double check my entries. And for cubic function, we're going to go to Stat, over to Calc. Number 6 is cubic function. So we have y equals ax to the third plus bx squared plus cx plus d, where a was 1, b was -2, c was 0, and d is 0. So y equals, we're not going to put the 1 in front of the x cubed because it's understood, minus 2x squared. And then if I put 0 in for c, 0 times x would be 0, so I wouldn't put that term either. And since d is 0, I'm not going to write plus 0. So the answer to number 1 will be y equals x cubed minus 2x to the third. So let's look at example 2. This time they want a quartic function. You can see that our data is a little different. Our x values are -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But our y values are different from example 1. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to clear L2 out. Let's put these correct data in there. All right, I'm going to double check my data. All right, so we want a quartic function. So we're going to go to Stat. We're going to go over to Calc, and number 7 is quartic. Let me check my entries. Okay, this should be -3. Oh, that looks better. All right, so 1 x to the 4th plus 0 x squared. C is all right, A is 1, B is 0, C is -4, D is -1 e to the -12. That means that I'm going to move my decimal place 12 times to the left. E is the same way, e to the -12, I would move it 12 times to the left. What we're going to do is we're just going to disregard D and E. Those digits are so insignificant that it's like adding +0 and +0. You're going to see this in my math lab, so pay attention. When you get something like e to the -12th, just disregard those coefficients. You're not going to use those at all. So the only ones that are relevant to us, since we have A is 1, B was 0, C was -4, and D and E, we're going to disregard those because they had that e to the -12th, which tells me that they were very, very, very insignificant. So we're not even going to worry about that. So if we plug it into our standard form, y equals ax to the fourth plus bx cubed plus cx squared plus dx plus e. That's y equals 1x to the fourth. We're not going to put that 1. Plus 0x to the third. 0 times any term gives me 0, so that's going to go away. Minus 4x squared, and we took away the d and the e because 0 times anything is 0. All right, let's look at example 3. Use the table below to answer the questions. So of course we're going to have to enter this data into our stat edit L1. So let's clear it out from the previous problem. And now let's enter this data. Again, bear with me, it is difficult to enter this data. Using my laptop that I'm having to use to record this for you. Okay, so it wants us to make a scatter plot. So I'm going to make sure that my scatter plot is on. It is. So remember, I'm going to zoom 9. So when I zoom 9, there's my data. Question B says, does it appear that a linear model or a cubic model is a better fit for this data? Well, I would say because it's got that curve and it's not a straight line, it's probably going to be better represented by a cubic model. Okay, let's go on to the next question. So find a cubic function that models the data. So we've got our data already entered in L1 and L2. So to find a cubic function, I'm going to go to Stat. I'm going to go over to Calc, and our cubic function is number 6. We're going to round to 3 decimal places. Actually, let's round to 4. So 1.1018, I look to the right, that's a 5, so that's going to round up to a 9. I go to my 4th decimal place here, which is a 1. I look to the right, so since that's a 5, it's going to round up to a 2. 8108, I look to the right, that's a 4, so that's going to remain an 8. 2.666, I look to the right, so since that's a 6, that's going to round up to a 7. So my values here would be y equals, this is the correct rounding. I know that I'm spending a lot of time on rounding, and some of you might think why I'm doing that, but just in reviewing the problems in class, students are missing them because of rounding errors. I want to be sure that you're practicing rounding correctly. Next question that it asks us is find a linear function. So I'm going to go back to Stat. I'm going to go to Calc. I'm going to go to number 4, which is my linear regression. Again, to be consistent, we're going to look and we're going to round to 4 decimal places. So this is 4571. Since that's a 4, that stays at 1. 9333. So the linear function would be y equals 3.4571x minus 7.933. Visually determine which model is the best fit for the data. So to do that, we could come back to y equals and we could put in our data. So I'm going to start off by putting in my cubic function. Okay, so I've put in my cubic function in y1 and in y2, my linear function. So I'm going to zoom 9, see if we can see. In y1, I put my cubic function in first. That's a straight line, so that would be my linear function. Of course, I have an error. It should be 2 point. Now let's try zoom 9 again. You can see that this is my cubic function in y1, and that straight line is my linear function. So which one best represents the data? Definitely the cubic. All right, the next problem. Use the table below to answer the question. So we need to enter this data. So I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to enter that data. Okay, so I've got my data entered in L1 and L2. Part A says find a cubic function. So we're going to go to Stat. We're going to go to Calc. We're going to go down to number 6 for my cubic function. We're going to round to 3 decimal places. So A is 35. B would be negative 333.66. That's going to round to a 7. C is 920.76. That is going to round to a 2. And negative 677.714. It gives us our standard function, so our cubic function would be this. Then it says to take the same data and find the quartic function. So we're going to go back to Stat. We're going to go to Calc, and quartic function is number 7. So A is 12.515. B would be negative 165.242. C is 748. D, negative 1,324.81. That is going to round to a 4, 814. And 738.286. So Y equals. Okay, so there's your quartic function. It says examine the graph of each. This is part C. Does it appear that a cubic model or a quartic model is the best fit? So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go to Y equals. I'm going to clear out my previous data, and I'm going to put these in. So I'm going to pause the recording while I put this in. Okay, so I've entered the data for this example into Y equals. I put my cubic function into Y1 and my quartic function into Y2. Now I'm going to hit zoom 9. Y1, which is my cubic function, is graphing first. It's not coming very close to the data, is it? The second function that is being graphed comes from Y2, which is my quartic function. So does it appear that a cubic model or a quartic model is the best fit for the data? Definitely the quartic.